Hi everyone. Welcome to Actually ADHD. I'm Maud J or Jana or Carolee Ann, depending on where you found me. Today's video, you will notice, is just a voiceover of some PowerPoint slides. This is a talk that I gave in September of 2021. It's taken me this long to get around to actually finally recording myself giving it. This is a talk about ADHD and music that I gave to the Saskatchewan Music Teachers Organization over Zoom. So I hope you enjoy, and all of the materials that I mention at the end of the talk are linked in the description box below. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe. My name is Jana Willard. I am a 40-something homeschooling mom of a 6-year-old married to a computer engineer. I have a Bachelor of Music and Composition from the University of Calgary, and I am a member of Reedy Set Go, a local clarinet choir, where I play alto clarinet. I also have ADHD. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, more commonly known as ADHD or ADD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that primarily affects executive functions. That's a lot of big words to say that ADHD is a disorder that specifically affects how the brain develops, particularly in the area of executive functions, which are all those higher level self-control things that your brain manages. This includes everything from making, following, and completing plans, to controlling outward emotional responses, to maintaining attention, to sitting still, and to processing information. In other words, it's a pervasive disorder that affects literally every part of a person's life. There are 3 types of ADHD recognized in the DSM-5. Primarily inattentive type is characterized by inattention. These ADHDers tend to be dreamy types, quiet but not always on top of things. Primarily hyperactive impulsive type is characterized by physical hyperactivity, impulsive behavior, and talking all the time. Combined type, which is what I was diagnosed with, takes equal parts of both of the other types and mixes them together to see what kind of chaos it can create. It's often rather spectacular. It's important to note that people who have inattentive ADHD usually show some hyperactive impulsive symptoms and vice versa. The type you're diagnosed with is entirely dependent on how many of the criteria you meet for each type. The profile for ADHD includes poor working memory, long processing time, and poor discrimination. This is relative to what might be expected of someone with similar apparent intelligence who doesn't have ADHD. So let's talk about what each of these 3 things means for musicians who have ADHD. Working memory is the ability to hold things in your mind long enough to use the information. You know how you repeat a word over and over while looking for paper and a pen to write it down? That's keeping it in your working memory. Poor working memory means that ADHDers are likely to lose our place in a piece, forget anything we're told during the lesson that isn't written down, and forget to keep our supply of things like reads topped up, to understand information. So our initial response to a question may be, I don't know, and our actual answer can come anywhere from immediately to many minutes or even hours later. This means that it's often difficult for us to show you what we know and what we can do, and it can mean that we need to be asked questions in different words. It also means that following a conductor may be difficult, at least at first. Discrimination in this context has to do with knowing what we should pay attention to. I have poor auditory discrimination, which means that I have trouble maintaining attention to purely auditory input. Someone who has poor visual discrimination won't be able to focus on the right visual cues. All of this means that we are easily distracted by things in our environment, and it's not our fault. Other ADHD-specific traits that can impact musicians include forgetfulness, time blindness, poor follow-through on plans, poor response to criticism, and staying in one place. We forget our music, we're late for lessons and performances, we never practice, we completely melt down when we make one mistake, and we move all the time. That's not to say that it's all bad. If we get really sucked in, we will learn a piece backwards and forwards in 2 days. We can be extremely expressive musicians because of that emotional reactivity. On tests of creativity, where creativity is defined as the ability or tendency to think about things differently from most people, ADHDers score very high. We aren't all artists by any means, but there's a reason why a lot of artists, musicians, actors, writers, and dancers have ADHD. The other career that's got a high proportion of ADHDers is athletics, but that's more to do with being impulsive and hyperactive. And now we come to the reason I'm here. Practical ways ADHDers can be helped to succeed in music when our symptoms are messing with us. The bonus is that things that help ADHDers usually help neurotypical people too. So adding these tips to your teaching toolkit will help all of your students. Confession time. I have never been great about practicing. The thing is, I'm a good sight reader and have some musical talent, so it wasn't a huge problem and most of my teachers couldn't tell. My private teacher when I was in high school always knew though, and I still have no idea how. I mean, in first year university musicianship class, there was one assignment I practiced for really hard, and when I did it in class, it just didn't work, and the professor told me I needed to practice. A few weeks later, I barely practiced the assignment and did it almost perfectly in class, and he told me, "See what happens when you practice?" There are a number of reasons why we may not be practicing in between lessons, and I have some ideas that may help with each. So first, the reason for not practicing: anxiety. We don't want to bother others. One of the reasons I didn't like to practice when I was in high school was that I did it in the dining room and our dogs would start howling. Things that may help. Discuss with your students and their parents whether there may be a time and or place they can practice without having to worry about disturbing anyone else. Maybe soundproofing their bedroom or their music room will give them a space to practice that will keep the sound from escaping too much. Perhaps there is a time of day when siblings can be sent outside to play and parents can busy themselves at the other end of the house. Maybe a weighted full-size keyboard with earphones is the answer. Something will click for them. Remember, the goal is to get them to practice, not to get them over the fear of bothering someone. We don't want to deal with mistakes. Another reason I didn't like to practice was that the reason I love to play the clarinet is that I simply love to play. I hate making mistakes, especially if other people might hear me. The teacher, it's important for you to hide any frustration you may feel. Take the time to reassure your students that they are there to learn and you don't expect them to do things perfectly the first time. Remind them that practicing is how they will get to where they can play perfectly every time. It's okay to make mistakes after all. We all do at first. Now, reasons for not practicing related to time management issues or inertia. First up, you keep thinking there's loads of time and then suddenly it's bedtime. One reason I don't get stuff done on time is that I literally don't realize how much time has gone by. Time isn't real, and for those of us with time blindness, it's really not real. To help, you can encourage your students to schedule a time every day for practicing. It's important to make this happen daily so that it is harder to forget to do it. Write that information in their lesson book notes, maybe with a tracking grid so they can mark off when they practice each day. Accountability will help a lot. Also, make sure their parents know about this agreement. Also, under time management, we often have difficulty prioritizing tasks. Prioritizing tasks is notoriously difficult for ADHDers. For us, everything is important if we're interested in it, and everything else is unimportant. We tend to be more about the big picture than the tiny details, which is why practicing tends to be low on our list of things we enjoy. To help with this, talk with your students about priorities. If you want to be a professional musician, you need to practice 40 hours a day. If you watch 2 set, you know. Acknowledge that schoolwork is also very important, and if they are struggling with what to do when, help them or talk to their parents about helping their children learn to do this. If the problem is that they aren't sure what to focus on first when they sit down to practice, prioritize the assignments in their lesson books and take some time during a lesson to teach them how to practice effectively. Next, can be uncertain how long it will actually take. Like I said before, time isn't real. And because it isn't real, it's really common to think that things we don't want to do take forever and things we love to do take next to no time. And let me tell you, the advice to track your time so you know how long things really take is not something that's easy for people whose disability is characterized by inconsistency. For people who have little to no awareness of time, it can be really hard to make sure we allow ourselves enough time to get something done. This can be helped by noting how long students should spend on each item on the week's list. How long do scales take? How long on studies? How long on each piece? It's okay to give a range, like spend at least 5 minutes on this study and no more than 10. If you feel like you need more, write down the problems and start with those the next day. More reasons for not practicing. Overwhelm. There might be too many steps to follow in order to practice. If I am going to practice my clarinet, I have to set up my folding music stand, put together both clarinets, and find the music, which is usually in my clarinet bag, but if I want to play something different, I'll have to search. This can be overwhelming for someone who struggles with making and following plans. If your student feels like getting ready to practice is too complicated, it's time to help them figure out how to simplify it. Help them make a checklist of steps to follow for practicing. For example, all the steps to prepare, then do what's in your lesson book, then the steps to finish. This list can go in a page protector with a dry erase marker and be kept in the front of their lesson book. Parents can help their children with this entire process by allowing them to keep their piano books on the piano, or by having a dedicated practice corner with an instrument stand and music stand so that instruments can be kept put together and music can be left out. This eliminates so many steps from the getting ready to practice checklist. Next up, too many pieces to practice every day. ADHDers are really good at overcommitting ourselves. Left to my own devices, I think that I would end up trying to work on 5 or 6 pieces at once just because I wanted to learn them all. Moderation? What's that? If your student seems overwhelmed by how much they have to do for lessons, cut back. My private teacher in high school had me working towards Royal Conservatory music exams every year, so I had 2 or 3 big pieces, several studies in various scales and arpeggios, and dominant sevenths. That worked out in the end because it meant that I had some great pieces to play when I was auditioning for university. I also have my grade 9 practical. I played in the Kiwanis Festival every year, but we used pieces I was learning for my exams, so it wasn't too much. The years I played a duet with a flautist friend at festival, we chose pieces that were fairly easy to learn. The other music I had on my plate was for concert band and for our community music and drama group. Forgetfulness. We forget to practice. Before I started using planners, I never had practice clarinet on a to-do list. So forgetting to practice was a thing that happened a lot. Dr. Russell Barkley talks about ADHD being primarily a disorder of intention, and that rings true to me. ADHDers can have great intentions and get sidetracked really easily since we can't control our attention very well. Your student may intend to practice, but get sidetracked constantly. If that's the case, teaching them about checklists can help a lot. Parents can be a huge help in establishing a routine for this by making it a regular part of their daily schedule. For example, get home from school on a weekday and immediately practice. Have your afternoon snack and then practice. Things like that. Next, we forget what to practice. I misplace things a lot. This means that, especially when I was a kid, I would lose my lesson book or my music. This got way better after my mom made me a denim music bag that had a section for my clarinet case and a section for my music and lesson book that was big enough for my band folder and had a pocket on the front for reeds. If your student tends to lose their lesson book, consider emailing them your notes each week. You can make this easy on yourself by using carbon paper over a piece of copy paper behind the page in their lesson book, and then just scan the copy and email it as an attachment. Even easier, at the end of the lesson, use your phone to take a photo of each page you've written on and text the photos to your student or their parents and keep them until after their next lesson in case they don't have their lesson book with them next time. Another idea is to just use sticky notes on the music itself. Use a lined one to list the pieces and scales, and they can check that list off every time they practice, and then use color-coded smaller ones to note what they need to focus on in each piece. Problems at lessons. Outside of practicing issues, ADHD can cause some problems during lessons. Thanks to time not being real, we are often late for things. Because our ability to pay attention to things can be so inconsistent, we miss instructions and social cues. I've had moments while playing where I completely lost my spot in the middle of a phrase because the music reminded me of something, or just because my brain is random. I've gotten lessons off track completely by bringing up a topic that was on my mind and usually only tangentially related to music, if at all. People who are physically hyperactive squirm in their seats, play when they aren't supposed to, etc. This makes me wonder if the entire trumpet section in the bands I've played in had ADHD. Problem number 1, lateness. At one point, I was struggling to be on time for work in the morning, and my manager suggested we move my start time. I refused this, preferring to figure things out for myself first. I had to figure out what was taking me so long and find solutions to all of those things. This meant eliminating some things from my morning routine, making my wardrobe simple by creating a rotation and hanging up hose with pants and skirts and jewelry with tops and packing my lunch the night before. I also decided to keep breakfast items in the fridge at work so I could eat when I got there. On top of that, I made sure to leave half an hour earlier than I thought I should, just in case of traffic issues, and I started calling ahead if I was still going to be late in spite of everything. While it's tempting to offer to change the lesson time, it's actually more effective to ask your students and their parents to find ways to streamline things so they can be on time for their lessons. It may help everyone if you start requiring all students to arrive 15 minutes early so they can use the bathroom before the lesson and get settled into the environment. Next, we miss instructions. When I'm in an ensemble, I do my best to listen to the leader so I know what's going on. But sometimes I miss information. Which piece are we playing now? Where are we starting? Which section is playing and why? Oops, we were supposed to stop. Sometimes this happens because there is outside noise making it hard for me to hear what is being said. Sometimes others are talking. Sometimes I'm talking. Sometimes I'm marking my music. Ensuring a quiet environment can be very helpful. Allowing time for students to write notes before starting to talk will also help. Multitasking isn't really a thing, and changing tasks can be really hard. You can also provide a list of pieces before the lesson or right at the start so they can put their music in order ahead of time. Expect to repeat yourself and try not to be too frustrated. Remember that your students want to do well, but they can't necessarily do what they want or need to do as easily as we'd like. We miss social cues. Social skills are hard, especially when you struggle to maintain attention. I have said things that made me look foolish. I have said things that insulted others. Impulsive speech is a problem. Keep expectations clear. Consider putting up posters that show desired behavior. For example, Suzuki lessons begin with bowing, and then you need to get ready to play and wait to be told to start. A basic, generic lesson schedule would be really useful for this purpose, especially if it's got both words and pictures. For basic social behaviors, think like a preschool teacher and put up a poster with lots of images to illustrate things like listening to the teacher. We get distracted while playing. A couple of years ago, I was playing with Ready, Set, Go and realized the piece we were playing had a bunch of dominant sevenths in it. That got me wondering about my old private teacher, and then I wanted to look for her. I put a note for myself on my phone so I could Google her later at home, but I also got a bit lost in the piece. Obviously, you can't control for everything, especially not when the ADHD brain is perfectly capable of distracting itself from whatever we're doing. This is just part of having ADHD. You can help your students learn to write down their extraneous random ideas and thoughts so they can explore them later when they aren't trying to play music or pay attention in a lesson. We talk about topics that don't relate to the lesson content. Just like getting distracted while playing, we can get distracted during a lesson. Random things can trigger a leap in topics. Once I was driving somewhere with my mom, and we were talking about something when we drove past a playground, and I said something about a slide. It had nothing to do with our conversation. It probably says something about my mom, that she made the leap with me and knew why I changed the subject. If you have a student who gets distracted a lot, you may find that you're often getting sidetracked during lessons. If this happens, you can gently redirect them to the appropriate topic and help them keep a list of those topics so you can discuss them later. If possible, you could maintain 15 minutes at the end of each lesson for going back to those topics. If that's not an option, stick to the gentle redirection and maintaining the list of topics. And we have physical hyperactivity and impulsive behaviors. This is probably the most difficult part of having ADHD. We can't stay still when we want or need to, and we end up distracting other people and doing things we don't want to do. In a lesson, you'll see students talking when they shouldn't and playing when they shouldn't. They'll wiggle around in their chair, poke at things with their fingers, or, as I did while bored in grade 6 band class, carve lines into the back of the upper joint of their uncle's clarinet with a jeweler's screwdriver. One thing that you need to remember about ADHD is that if we're moving around, it's probably our brain trying to help us stay alert. Fidgeting is one of those things that makes it easier for us to pay attention, and forcing us to suppress it will make it so we can't focus on anything besides sitting still. Providing movement breaks can help a lot, partly because the movement helps reset the brain. If we're focusing okay and then start to lose focus, moving can help us get focus back. You can offer a wiggle cushion for the student to sit on. This will allow them to get gross motor movement while playing and when trying to listen to you. If they fiddle with their hands a lot, they might benefit from a tangle to play with or even weighted stuffies that can sit on their hands. If they tend to stick things in their mouths, you could suggest to their parents that a chewy is in order. This doesn't cover every possible situation, of course, but hopefully I've been able to give you enough information that you'll be able to find ways to help your students, all of them, succeed in music. Like I said, strategies that help ADHDers often help neurotypicals too. A lot of ADHD-related challenges are also very similar to those experienced by autistic people, so if you have an autistic student, these strategies may be helpful as well. They're just all around useful as long as you take the time to match the strategy to the student. I've put together a package of printable materials for you. You'll find an info sheet about ADHD, some strategy cards about the problems and solutions I discussed today, posters you can put up in your studio to remind students how to behave, and templates for a practice log and a practice checklist. Feel free to share these resources with your students and their parents.